I'm Peter Parker, an utterly ordinary person. At least until that morning, I had always thought so. I sprinted after the school bus. My classmates on the bus shot me mocking glances. Only Mary Jane stepped forward to speak. Only then did the driver slam on the brakes. This is my everyday life, a cowardly, clumsy person. Someone who goes unnoticed and unremarked. But there was also a ray of light in my world, Mary Jane Watson. She had been my lifelong neighbor, and the one I had secretly admired for as long as I could remember. Her smile was like sunshine, warm and dazzling. I often stole glances at her, but I never dared to approach. She hung out with the popular boys, and I was nothing more than an unnoticed shadow. But at least, I had my Uncle Ben and Aunt May. They were the ones who loved me more than anyone in the world. Even though we weren't well off, they always supported me unconditionally and taught me about kindness and responsibility. But back then, I didn't truly understand the meaning of those words. Until one day, when fate quietly turned a new page. That day at the Science Museum, everything was different. I took my camera to capture Mary Jane's laughter. Unfortunately, I remained the same shy, introverted kid. Then, an inconspicuous spider silently dropped from the ceiling and, in a delicate yet eerie manner, bit the back of my hand, leaving only a pinprick of pain and a small reed bump as my destiny was forever altered. After I got home, my body felt as if it were being scorched by flames. My forehead burned with heat, and I sensed that I was undergoing an inexplicable transformation. I drifted off for days, dreaming of countless fine threads intertwining and stretching into infinite darkness. By the time I woke up, my world had changed. In the mirror, I saw that my once frail body had become solid. My formerly skinny arms now bore defined muscles. My eyes shone brightly, and my senses of hearing and touch were sharper than ever. At lunch at school, as Mary Jane walked by, I suddenly sensed something, and instinctively turned to catch her just as she was about to fall. My body had become incredibly swift, and my reactions were far beyond normal. I tried scaling a wall, and discovered that I could climb it with the ease of a spider, even leaping between tall buildings. I stared at my hands in astonishment, my heart pounding. I had changed. I was no longer the timid Peter Parker. Having these newfound powers meant I could change my life. This sparked a desire in me longing to be noticed, to no longer be the bullied nerd, and to adopt a new identity that would catch Mary Jane's eye. So I entered an underground wrestling competition solely to win the prize money. But just as I was eager to test my new abilities, Uncle Ben always keenly sensed a hint of restlessness in my heart.
We need to talk.
At that moment, my heart was brimming with inflated confidence and impatience. I listened impatiently, not wanting to hear his repeated counsel. It was always the same stereotype I'd heard countless times: responsibility, duty, and being a good person. Uncle Ben looked at me intently and slowly said,
These are the years when a man changes into the man he's going to become the rest of his life. Just be careful who you change into. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Are you afraid that I'm going to turn into some kind of criminal? Quit worrying about me, okay? Something's different. I'll figure it out. Stop lecturing me, please.
I don't mean to lecture and I don't mean to preach. And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
At the moment he finished speaking, I paid no mind to the fleeting darkness and sorrow in Uncle Ben's eyes. Closing the car door, I ended our last conversation. I stood in the ring, facing a burly man several times my size, with not a trace of fear. Once the match began, I effortlessly dodged uppercuts and launched a flurry of kicks, winning the bout in less than a minute. I stood on the platform, listening to the cheers from the crowd, as an unprecedented sense of fulfillment filled my chest. At last, I was no longer the invisible Peter Parker. I could let the world see how strong I truly was. But when I went to collect my winnings, the organizers made excuses to withhold most of the prize money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
I was furious but utterly helpless. Just as I stepped out of the office, a robber burst in, grabbed a bag full of cash, and dashed off in panic. The organizers rushed out in panic, intentionally clearing the path as I watched the robber approach.
You could have taken that guy apart. Now he's gonna get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem. They had cheated me out of my money, so they deserved to be robbed. But when I got back outside, I saw a crowd gathered in the distance, with flashing police lights. I froze, a sense of foreboding welling up inside me. I pushed through the crowd and saw the person lying on the ground, Uncle Ben. His chest was soaked in blood, and he raised his hand weakly, his eyes gentle but pained. I knelt beside him, tears streaming uncontrollably. But in the next moment, he softly closed his eyes. An indescribable pain spread from deep within me. The police soon caught the culprit, and when I chased him down and saw his face, my world crumbled. It was the robber I had let escape. If I had stopped him, Uncle Ben would still be alive. Uncle Ben's death left me living in the shadow of guilt. Emma came to my side.
He never doubted the man you'd grow into. How you were meant for great things. You won't disappoint him.
It reminded me of what Uncle Ben had said.
With great power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that.
From that moment, I was no longer Peter Parker. I had become Spider-Man. Every day after school, I soared between New York skyscrapers, hunting down criminals and taking on wrongdoers. I put on a mask to conceal my identity and began using my powers to protect others, rather than to indulge my own desires. Mary Jane was drawn to Spider-Man's man, never realizing that the one quietly watching over her was me. I became the city's protector, as well as a lonely wanderer. Every successful rescue filled me with solace, as if it could ease Uncle Ben's spirit. Yet the path of a hero is never easy. Harry's father, Norman Osborn, after a failed experiment, split mentally and became the Green Goblin, turning into a nightmare for the city. On the eve of Thanksgiving, the Green Goblin set off a bomb in the heart of the city. Flames soaring skyward, its power enough to vaporize a person in an instant. I charged at him in an attempt to stop him, but he snatched me up and slammed me against the wall. His strength was staggering, and his attacks were ruthless. Every blow could leave me gravely injured. Luckily, I found an opening and managed to wreck his glider.
We'll meet again, Spider-Man!
But to my surprise, the very next day he tracked down a newspaper office, grabbed the owner by the neck, and demanded to know who had provided photos of Spider-Man. Although the owner usually treated me poorly, he did not betray me at that moment, and I managed to intervene in time. But I never expected the Green Goblin to unleash toxic gas on me. When I regained consciousness, I found that he hadn't really harmed me. He merely wanted to team up with me. He saw potential in my superpowers, but I flatly rejected him. From that moment on, I was no longer just the city's guardian. I had become his enemy as well. He warned me to stay out of his affairs in the future, threatening that if I didn't heed his advice, I should fear his retribution. But to my shock, the very next day, bad news broke out. Newspapers printed that I was in cahoots with him, and photos of me were posted all over the city, with everyone treating me like a menace.
In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you.
But I believe that justice will ultimately triumph over evil. During a high-maintenance Rise fire rescue, when all the firefighters were at a loss, my arrival became their beacon of hope. Though I soon discovered it was all part of the Green Goblin's plan. He once again extended an invitation, but I refused him once more. In our battle, I was unexpectedly slashed by one of his concealed blades, and not wanting to get entangled any further, I seized the opportunity to escape. Because it was Aunt May's birthday, I didn't want to miss this important family gathering. All my best friends had come over to my place, along with Harry's father, Norman. I changed into my clothes and walked in through the front door, and just as we were about to eat, Aunt May noticed the wound on my hand. Once she rolled up my sleeve, Norman put down his utensils and announced he had urgent business to attend to and left. That same night, Aunt May was attacked by the Green Goblin, and the shock drove her to a mental breakdown. The Green Goblin's threats made me realize that being Spider-Man's man not only changed my life, but also endangered everyone I cared about. He not only wreaked havoc in the city, but he also set his sights on the people I loved. He kidnapped Mary Jane and took her to the George Washington Bridge, standing at the bridgehead like a scene from a movie, coldly watching me.
Let die the woman you love, or suffer the little children. We are who we choose to be. Now choose!
The Green Goblin grinned triumphantly, let go of her, and Mary Jane screamed as she plummeted, along with the cable car. There was no time to hesitate. I lunged forward with all my strength, grabbing Mary Jane while clutching the cable car. Gravity pulled me into directions, nearly ripping my arms apart. But I held on with all my might until a fairy came close enough to help steady the cable car. I won at least. I saved them. But the fight was far from over. The Green Goblin didn't give me a moment to breathe. He pounced on me and tossed me into an abandoned building. Before I could recover, I was struck by one of his bombs. His assault was even more relentless than before. I was knocked down over and over, and my strength to fight back was fading. He didn't want me to die so easily. He threatened that he would torture Mary Jane to death. Hearing that, I stood up. This time, I no longer dodged and met his attacks head me aside, fighting him with every bit of strength I had. My anger fueled my punches as I battered him, until he finally removed his helmet in surrender. I then realized that the Green Goblin was actually Harry's father, trying to manipulate me with emotion while remotely controlling his glider.
Godspeed, Spider-Man.
But he hadn't anticipated that my Spider-Man sense would let me dodge, and a sharp blade sliced through his body.
Don't tell Harry.
When I brought his body back to Harry's house, he looked at me in shock and fury. He wrongly assumed that Spider-Man had killed his father, his eyes filled with hatred. On the day of the funeral, Harry stood by his father's grave and vowed to avenge him, leaving me with a torrent of conflicting emotions. I didn't know if I was right or wrong. Mary Jane approached me, her eyes shimmering with tears. She gently touched my face.
I love you.
It was the moment I had always dreamed of, yet I found myself unable to respond.
All I wanted was to tell her how much I loved her. I can't.
I knew that if I embraced her, her life would be at risk. I looked at her, took a deep breath.
I will always be your friend.
Her eyes were full of disappointment and confusion, but I could only choke back my tears and walk away. I knew it was the only option. I changed into my Spider-Man suit and stood atop a skyscraper. I am Peter Parker. I am Spider-Man.